you know, and you'll be a rich man. The issue with water is that there isn't that much of it, and we're running out. So one of the non-renewable resources to really care about is water and the way we use it. Sorry. Okay. The differences of the problem with the definition of sustainability, of meeting the needs of today while making sure that future generations can meet their own needs, was not really viable because the question of needs needs to be defined. The needs of a family in America or the Western Hemisphere or Canada in their weekly food supply versus the needs of a family in the developing world are totally different. So you have to be able to really define what needs are. And needs change according to cultures, and they change according to time. Another thing about sustainability that's very confusing, and I found this in discussions with architects like Richard Rogers in London and so on, is it's not solely about saving energy. Sustainability is not just energy-saving devices in a building, which we tend to think it is because of LEED's development and so on. It's about thinking globally but acting locally. It's about thinking jointly. It's about thinking about communities and thinking about interconnectedness. It's the interconnectedness of the world and not just one individual or one building. So there are two basic approaches of sustainability, as I said in my introduction. The first is that technology can solve every problem. And the second is that there's a more appropriate way to approach it that's less technologically intense. In the Institut du Monde Arabe by Jean Nouvel, there was this approach of high technology. He took a traditional element of the mashrabiyah screen, which is common in this area, and he made it into titanium. These titanium screens open up in the wintertime to let more heat in, and they close down in the summertime to prevent overheating. The problem is, there are three problems really. The system never works. They have to have a full-time repairman on duty to be able to fix these screens. The second is that they open up in the summertime and close in the winter. They do just the opposite that they're supposed to do. And the third is that they use a material that's not sustainable. Titanium is a non-renewable resource. And so very often the high-tech approach to sustainability is wrong-headed. It doesn't really approach the idea of energy, embodied energy in a material. It just approaches a superficial kind of approach. The technological direction is probably best typified by Buckminster Fuller, now deceased, who is very famous for geodesic domes that he did. These geodesic domes were intended to hold up to 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people. He even designed some for much bigger cities. The idea here was that they would have their own weather inside, that basically no matter what the weather was outside, you could generate air-conditioned environment inside and defy whatever environmental problems came your way. He did a dome in New York that was intended to do this. And, whoops. Sorry, this isn't keeping up with me, I'm afraid. It takes time to load this. I think that's what's going on. Is that it? Sorry, the system it's too slow. It's not working. So what do I do? Just stop?
Yeah, you finished?
No.
No, they are working to solve it. The click time will not work.
Okay, I can't show my images apparently. I'm sorry about that. So I would just extemporaneously say that what I was going to talk about was the fact that I first came here in 1980, and I've seen many changes in this region. Now I don't recognize it. The last time I came here in January to speak at King Faisal University, now Dammam University, I didn't recognize the area at all. It's changed so much. And the kingdom is growing rapidly, as is every other part of the world. This leaves an opportunity for you as architects and planners and developers and designers of the built environment to be able to take a direction here that's different than the direction being taken elsewhere. There seems to be a predilection to focus on technology, that technology is the answer for the future, that technology can solve every problem that we have. But I would offer an alternative, and in the past in the kingdom there were buildings here which offered a promise of a different direction. Rather than the slick and sleek and cool glass and steel towers, air-conditioned, that everyone loves, the high-rise buildings that seem to be so popular, there is an opportunity here to do something different. And that opportunity still exists. I think the direction of appropriate technology is one that I would recommend. And that means not always the most modern approach. Very often this gets tied to the idea of being backward, or being tied to the past, or being tied to things that are no longer progressive. But I think that there are examples today that I wanted to show you, which basically would show that there's a middle way. One of these examples is now being built in Abu Dhabi. It's called Masdar City. Masdar City is designed by Norman Foster. Norman Foster is one of the most leading proponents of the high technology approach. But in recent years, he's been doing a lot of research and a lot of thinking, a lot of discussion about how to modify that approach to meet a more traditional, more vernacular approach. And Masdar City is an example of that. I don't hold that out as the premier example of what the future should be. It certainly has problems. But I think what's interesting about it, as an example that I was going to show, and you can find it online, or maybe you know about it also, it's that it utilizes all of the ideas of the traditional Arab city, and it utilizes those in marriage with the idea of modernism and the idea of high technology as well. So it uses technology, but it's not used by technology. It uses technology in order to solve problems related to the environment, but it's still an appropriate approach. It's not an overly technological approach. How does it use those ideas? Well, first of all, what's interesting about it is it's a Western architect, a very famous one, who is looking at this part of the world and saying, what can the buildings of the past teach me? What can I learn from that? As a leader of the high-tech movement, what can I find? And what he found was that there's a wisdom in traditional direction. And it's that wisdom that we really have to be open to, I think, and be conscious of, and not dismiss as being old-fashioned or out of date. The wisdom that our forefathers had was basically to be in touch with nature, to be in touch with the environment, to be in touch with ecology, to be in touch with the past in a way that would help the future. They weren't dismissive of it. And so Masdar City is basically showing the ideas, if I can list them, basically, of orientation. You know, it's a simple thing, the way the streets are oriented. It's a 1 mile square city, and now there's about 1 hectare already built in preparation. It's going to be built out over about a 10-year period. It's zero carbon footprint. It has no carbon use at all. Basically creates its own energy. It utilizes solar energy. It makes its own distills its own water, and so on. And so it's a very energy efficient city. It utilizes ideas of narrow streets oriented north and south, so that on the east and west axes you get shade all day. It utilizes ideas of wind towers. It utilizes ideas of Mashrabiyah screens. It utilizes the idea of privacy. It utilizes ideas that are found in every city in the Arab world up until 1970s. And so there are models out there. I think that that's my plea this morning to start off this conference. If I had to make one recommendation, would be to not be seduced by the glowing high-rise buildings that we see everywhere, and just try to look at a different model, to look at a different direction, because I think that direction is out there. You have many architects in this region, Rassam Badran, who spoke here in January, Abdul Wahid Al-Wakil, Ibrahim Abdul Halim, various other architects who are doing amazing work, and that work should not be dismissed as being old-fashioned just for the love of novelty or the love of modernism. I think that's my plea. My first experience here when I taught at what was then King Faisal University was with an architect named Hassan Fatih, who basically held out these ideas. And I went to visit him and wrote a book about him it came out in 1988. And I always talk about it as my second doctorate after my planning doctorate, because he taught things about looking to traditional wisdom and not negating it or not giving it up. And it changed my life, and basically since then I've been trying to pass that message on. His disciples have also tried to be more realistic. One of them proposed a building for this very site. It was not accepted because it was a bit out of fashion. But I would say that it would bear looking at instead of just going with the crowd and trying to do things that are fashionable, because fashion goes out of fashion. But things that are solid stay in our mind. A man here named Henning Larsson did the foreign ministry in Riyadh. And I remember seeing that building when it was first built. It was one of the most amazing buildings I've ever seen. And it's a very low-rise building. It uses thermal mass. It uses many of the ideas of traditional architecture. Henning Larsson's now doing glass and steel skyscrapers for Riyadh. So you can pay him to do, I guess, whatever you want. But he was doing what he thought was good for the kingdom in the beginning, and now he's doing what I guess he's being paid to do. So my plea this morning, and I make it very, very passionately, is to keep your mind open. Keep your mind open to your heritage. Keep your mind open to your history. Keep your mind open to what you have that other people don't have in the world, and utilize that to your best advantage. That's my message. I'm sorry about my images on a Taban also, so my long flight. I see a lot of old friends in the audience, and thank you for having me here. And good morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor James Steele. I would like to apologize from the organizer, on behalf of the organizing committee, that we did not have the luxury to see the whole presentation. But we can, get a glimpse about what Professor Steele have said. Now, starting with the definition of sustainability, and he claimed that has nothing to do